This is bordering on a drinking game for our listeners.
Yeah, there you go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are Irenicast, a group of folks leaning into our progressive Christian imagination. This is Rajeev.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Bonnie.
And I'm Casey.
On the first and third Tuesday of every month,
We provoke conversation for shifting perspectives.
On theology and culture.
This week, we're talking about hope. And our segment is a brand new one, invented by yours truly, called Buddy Bingo. More on that after.
teaser. I like it. Nice.
So the concept of hope is just a really big one. And my first question for us, and try to keep this as concrete as possible. Give yourselves a chance to stay in the concrete realms before we move into the outer spacey realms. But how do you define hope?
Mine is probably, our last conversation was on faith. And I know that faith and hope for a lot of people are very related. But my hope for me is like the best definition I can come up with is that it is a projection of the future that is calculated by life experience and worldview.
Nice. Super concrete.
Maybe a little too much.
No, it's helpful though.
Yeah.
It's helpful to have that.
I like the idea of a projection into the future of the future. But I think hope is so present moment. And it's like moment to moment, it has to be renewed. Hope feels less durable than faith and love and some of the other things that we, this faith language that we use. So I would say it's an idea that things are going to be okay. It's an idea that things are going to be okay that has to be regenerated moment by moment. If I was trying to be concrete, it would be that's as concrete as I could go.
Thanks. All right, Casey.
That sounded good to me. Damn. Yeah, it's a projection that we hold on to moment by moment. I love that moment by moment piece. And it's also way less. Faith and love are so much easier to talk about. Hope is harder, I think.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that too, Bonnie. Like I think that when I say that the projection in the future is calculated on life experience, I think it's an honest reflection of our past and present as part of what informs how we look into that. So I think it's an ever changing thing.
And there's something cumulative about it, but
yes, but
also, it feels like a bubble. It's like so amazing when it's there, but it bursts. It can burst and you have to do it again.
Right. And I think a lot of times, like our last conversation on faith, I think a lot of people would say that the opposite of faith is fear. And, we were seeing that stupid slogan all over the place right now, but I would say that fear is the opposite of hope, is that it's taking that projection and those things that we're using to manifest that projection and determining what the future is going to look like. And it comes down to good or bad. Is it going to be, I have hope if it's good and I am fearful if it's not.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like fear being kind of the opposite of hope. That makes a lot of sense to me. And both of those things, fear and hope, have a very temporary, like if fear becomes something that is just like deep in your bones, then that's going to be a really hard way to live, But fear can be regenerated moment by moment. So can hope.
And which one do you choose?
Exactly.
You were talking about life experiences and stuff, Jeff. And I think that for some people, that projection of hope is something that they have yet to experience, and it lives outside of them. I think of young people who live in closets, right? Queer kids who do not know what lives on the other side of their hope. It's almost like faith and this thing of I just trust that someday this will be better. And so there's a lot of hope there. I hope that I can survive blah, 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 this moment, basically. So it is even, I think, beyond your own experience and the promise or the trust of something for a future that you have yet to see.
Right. And I think that promise being
Yeah.
communicated from someone also highlights that,
That's right.
that tension between hope and fear, because a lot of people will use fear as a way to control under the guise of hope,
That's right.
because they're so
Yes.
easily related and conflated with one another.
That's a really good point. Like, I think that isn't that what the prophets were doing, right? Like, well, some were evoking fear, but a lot of them were trying to instill hope for a future that had yet to be seen.
Mhm.
Something I wonder about hope is there's a couple of dynamics maybe. One that seems very common is that hope is a vehicle that gets us to something. It's sort of like a wish list. We have a hope list. Or is hope in and of itself the thing? It is its own objective.
I think the latter. I think hope is its own objective, because then, like, if we're talking about hope, like Bonnie brought up, being like the shifting thing related to our experience, it's kind of a place that we sit in until experiences and the world around us shifts, and then we try to find the next hope, the next kind of thing. So I think hope is probably an end in of itself.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that hope is one of the gifts of the spiritual life. Those who may be engaged in spiritual practices like meditation or prayer, or make a regular habit of something like yoga, whatever it is, something that feels like it's part of your evolutionary process around spirituality. I think that one of the gifts of that practice is hope. Sometimes it shows up in unexpected ways, and you're like, wow, even though there's a lot of darkness around me, I'm experiencing hope. How did that happen? Where did that come from? I would say it's probably directly connected to the spiritual life and spiritual practices, because maybe the other side of that would be fear, like Jeff was talking about. Disengaging, for me anyway, from some of that spiritual practices or from my spirituality, I can devolve into fear in like 1 second. So yeah, and that's that regeneration. That's why we do this over and over and over and over again, is because hope rises over and over and over again. It's not a steady presence with us.
Right. I mean, there was a period of time where Jesse Jackson was doing a lot of public speaking in and around DC when I lived there, and would go, I was at these events, and he often was like the final speaker, and he's a great public speaker. And his end phrase, even though you knew it was coming every time, was keep hope alive, keep hope alive, keep hope alive. And it's like you knew it was coming, and you still like needed it every single time. With the construct of hope, like how have you managed to reconstitute it into its place in your life today?
Today, I struggle desperately to manifest it every single day.
Yeah. I hear that.
Before, I think it was for a long time, it was just connected to heaven, better future. It was almost always connected to how my view of the afterlife evolved. The progression for me being, when I die, I go to heaven. I accepted Jesus. I have hope for that day. And then as I kind of went down the rabbit hole of different theologies and stuff, then it evolved to, oh, I see. There's a link between what that future is and what is now. And we can create links and kind of create pockets of heaven now leading up to something. And I think that's probably where I ended up resting in terms of the overall worldview. But just today, hope for like people being decent, and hope for like that we're headed towards something better. It's a struggle. It's kind of back to that. It feels like the same thing we were talking about in our last conversation, that wrestling, that there's this real struggle to keep hope alive, so to speak.
I feel like that idea of keeping hope alive is found in gratitude for me. And this sense of like, when I feel so hopeless, I try to reach for the things that might remind me of why there's a reason to still have it. It also then feels like a responsibility to pass that on. Like, if I have lost all hope in humanity, then maybe I can be someone who brings a little bit of decency back to that, right? Back to humanity. And in buying the person behind me Starbucks or whatever, maybe it might instill in them just a little more hope. And so for me, it's rooted in this place of like gratitude. If I am feeling like the world is dark and it is hopeless, then maybe I can just be a flicker of hope. And maybe that might inspire a little hope in somebody else. And together we might keep the fire alive.
I resist handing hope a to-do list. And just like we were talking about, I'm with you in that hope in and of itself is the thing. And, work to carry hope with me. And I'm feeling you, Jeff, on it's hard. And Bonnie, actually, you offered something. This was years ago. You probably won't even remember it, but it stuck with me. And you said, rather than like connecting hope to some of these things, use the language of I wonder. Like, I wonder what it will be like if, and then there's that thing that you're maybe wishing for would happen. But using that wonderment language also allows, like, I wonder what life will be like if that thing doesn't materialize. And it offers a framework to consider. And hope gets to be part of all of it. Hope doesn't get displaced because an objective isn't met.
Mm-hmm. There's different degrees of hope. I would say that some of that hope that was connected to the afterlife for me, and Jeff, I'm so glad you brought that into the conversation, because that's where the hope lies. For many of these communities, Christian communities, you're supposed to be able to put up with whatever happens in this life because there's this hope. That feels like such a disingenuous hope. Like even when I was there listening to it, it felt like that. It felt like the people who were trying to sell it also believed that it was a disingenuous hope. Now I think, finding hope in those moments of uncertainty, which is every single moment, in those moments of like pain and suffering, that's a much more authentic hope. And it's much harder. Like, it's much harder to, as Jeff was saying, manifest. And I think of, one of my heroes, Mr. Rogers, and, the story that circulates often about him and the story he tells of his mother, where when these bad things happen in the world, look for those who are helpers. Look for the helpers. What you were saying too, Casey, where, what flicker of hope can I offer that might inspire other hope? That's how hope works for me. It's like a little flicker that the more people participate in that little flicker with their own little flickers, then the flame of hope actually gets united. It's never a singular thing. It's always, always a communal thing. When it's really hard, what I try to remember is probably I lean more into my faith, which is that at the core of it all is goodness and love. When we feel hopeless or a lack of hope, it's because for some reason we can't see that. If we can see that, if we can find that, then even in the midst of all of this difficulty, I can figure out some sort of way to hope again for the moment, just for the moment. I don't know if that made any sense.
Harvey Milk, one of his most famous quotes is, "You got to give them hope." And that came after he had decided to run for office, and he's getting all this public national attention. And he gets this phone call from some kid in like some terrible state, just saying something like, I was going to kill myself. But seeing you and seeing your movement, it gives me hope. And Harvey Milk says something like, this is bigger than me. And if I can stay in this and I can continue to be brave and true, then maybe this might ignite hope in somebody else.
Just listening to the three of you talk right now, like, you know, we talk about hope being kind of the end itself. And, you know, so then what is the vehicle? And just hearing Casey, you say gratitude, and then Rajeev mentioning something that Bonnie said about wonder, like that's a pretty awesome tag team. Gratitude and wonder, and just
for sure
those being vehicles to get to a place of hope, even if it's just like a little hope, like not big hope, not like the world's going to be okay, but like, hey, today's going to be okay.
Right.
And finding those moments of gratitude and wonder, and how nice it is to sit in either or both of those things.
Well, neither of those require certainty.
Right.
And that's really helpful.
Yeah.
In fact, wonder, as soon as you have certainty, you sort of lose something in wonder.
Yeah.
This is why we love you, Bonnie.
Well, no, this is a collective effort here.
And I think that that's where our hopelessness really stems from, is that we want concrete things. We don't want to live into the mystery, especially as, first world people, like, who have all these great privileges, where we don't wait for anything and we suffer for nothing. We struggle with living into mystery because we don't want to live into uncertainty. And I think that allowing for there to be some gratitude in our wondering, and even if it isn't okay, like Rajeev was saying, even if the outcome is not what you would hope, is there still something that you can find gratitude for? Is the invitation for living, really. I mean, I read the book, what is it? The Something Joy by the Dalai Lama. Oh man. Anyway,
we'll figure it out. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And he was saying that, one of the things that he likes to do with people is like legit mess with them. Like, will on purpose, when they are in meetings and stuff, make something happen that disrupts the situation to create some sort of small chaos. Nothing super dramatic, but like he'll accidentally kinda bump something where water spills on the floor, because he wants to see how people will respond in those moments. What is your true nature when something goes off the charts? And the Dalai Lama basically is saying, like, if you can get yourself to a place of gratitude, even when the water is tipped, if you can get to a place of laughing and not this sort of uptight place, this stressed place, then maybe you found a way forward in your living. And I think about that all the time, because I am someone, when the water gets tipped, I'm freaking out. Even like last Sunday, all of our tech stuff I feel like, this is where my grandma's evangelicalism still exists. Like the devil is in the computer or whatever. Like, why every Sunday does our technology have to behave this way? And the last few Sundays, I found myself getting worked up, or like this anxious presence, which then leaks into everyone around me. Yep. And so this week I just started laughing, and I went to the mic and said, everything here is only a suggestion. And it shifts everything, right? If we can move to that place of wonder and gratitude, and not hold on to things so tightly, things change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the classes I took in seminary was on dying, death, and grief. And the professor, he would talk about hope as an integral element in the whole process, and would say, well, so long as there is breath, there is hope. And one of the students was like, hope in what? He's like, there is hope. The hope can be a myriad of things, but the outcomes aren't the point. And then they were like, well, what about when breath ends? We're all wrestling with this information. And he's like, he got a very Eastern was his response. He was like, one breath ending doesn't mean breath ends. Things continue to breathe. And even if humans cease to exist, the plants and the animals breathe, and there is hope.
I worked for an organization when I was in college with men dying of AIDS. So basically, every Saturday, I'd be hungover as hell, driving someplace in the Seattle area, mostly helping men get groceries, or just sitting with them and listening to their stories, or watching Judge Judy or whatever. And the guy that I spent the most time with, his name was Wayne. And Wayne had a really rough life. Gay, obviously, but didn't identify that way. He contracted AIDS in a hospital, right? Which was most likely not true. Couldn't get himself to tell the truth of his story. He was angry often. So I would show up hungover and I'd bring his menthols. I always had to bring the menthols. And we would go get him ice cream. This man who was dying of AIDS, who was diabetic. But I was like, you know what? If you want ice cream, honey, you have all the ice cream you want. And we're walking through the frozen food section one Saturday morning, and he turns around and he says, "Why was I handed these cards?" And in this moment, I'm 20 years old. I have a headache. It's early. Y'all know how I am in the mornings anyways. And I said, you know, Wayne, I can't answer that question, but I can be grateful for this moment. And it was enough for him in that moment to say, I'm glad that you exist now. I don't know what your past has been, but in this moment, I can be grateful that we have met and that we can be walking down the frozen food section getting your strawberry ice cream.
Right.
And that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, going back to what we're saying about, when it feels what is the point? When we can just reach for some strawberry ice cream and say, this can be enough for this moment.
Mm-hmm.
I am thankful and hope for more moments where I can enjoy this strawberry ice cream or whatever. It doesn't solve all the world's problems, but in this moment, if you can just hope for the next, it might be enough.
Yeah, I like that. I keep wondering, how this relates to Christianity and faith. And I like the idea of breath. This idea that hope is connected to life. Where there's life, there's hope. Where there is life, there's breath. If we're so deeply connected to that, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, or the breath of life, the story of God breathing the breath of life into creation. In so doing, perhaps also breathing hope into creation.
That was a big shift for me, reshifting my quote biblical understanding of life or theological understanding of life, because it was always eternal life, like we talked about in the beginning. It was always eternal life. So it was the life now and then living forever in the afterlife. So it was just this strict binary of, are you breathing here or are you living, you're going to be living there. And once, for me, I shifted that perspective. So now when I hear the term life, think of breath and all that kind of stuff, but it's this holistic past, present quality of life, right? Like when we have the abortion debate, are you pro-life? Your pro-breathing child is different from life, thriving economically, spiritually, in a way with mental health, mental health. And I think that when we talk about hope and where there's life, there's hope. I think where there's a life more abundantly, right? We use that word a lot. And what that means, it doesn't mean you just have God and now you're okay. Because I think that uses this beautiful thing of going from moment to moment, sitting in this spiritually divine mystery of God, and it weaponizes it to follow these rules, be in this context, do what we say. And that's the only way you can maintain or hold on to this hope, as opposed to experiencing life and how things that seem small or inconsequential. And I think I'm just going to say it, any spiritual leader that uses the physical life of, well, it doesn't matter on this plane, or you're going to do it, whatever that is full of shit, because you're not regarding the reality of what life really is. It is physical, it is spiritual, it's all of these things. And it has to do with economics. It has to do with providing people a way to live. So I think if we want to foster hope, then our political ideologies, informed by our faith ideologies, all have to be there in wanting and desiring to create a space of an abundant life for everyone. And that includes all the little things that we take for granted, like, being able to enjoy some ice cream in the midst of whatever everything else seems like, and even when we talk about like this attack of the poor a lot of times in our culture, and I'm going off on a tangent, but it's our show, so whatever. But like, one of the first things is, well, they have food stamps, but they have an iPhone. Like they're not allowed to enjoy a simple part of what like makes life and connects us all just because of their economic status. Like how there's these moments need to inform how we shape the greater reality around us. And, talking about a progressive Christian faith and what that looks like is, I think we need to have a more nuanced and expansive view of when we talk about life, and then its relationship to hope, and then creating more space for wonder and gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, listeners have heard me talk about process theology before, and Alfred North Whitehead, he has this concept of like God is all of creation and then some. And in the and then some, the transcendent aspects, there are these things called eternal objects, which would be like beauty and love. And, humans and all creation can bring those things into existence in our world. But I don't know if hope is one of those things, because I think hope is necessary where life is. If there was no life in the way that we understand life, then would hope even be necessary? I think beauty and love and peace and those things, joy, they may exist in some transcendent level, but I don't know if hope does.
Like hope is elemental.
Hope is elemental to life. Like that is something that has been so wrongly presented in a lot of Christianity, because hope is connected to something beyond life, which makes no sense whatsoever. And I think that's exactly what you're what you said beautifully, Jeff, is that it's about the hope leads us and guides us to this abundant life. Because hope informs us. It teaches us like what could be possible. And we need that teaching, and we need that motivation and that energy that hope brings us to get us all to this abundant life here, now, in this moment. Like anybody who connects hope to something beyond this life, which is what you just said, it's not hope. That's just, what is that? That's some kind of like snake charming thing or something.
I remember this is still in the more conservative world, tying into this, and we probably should do a whole episode on the afterlife, because we're kind of moving into that realm a little bit, which would be a great episode. But and this ties to what you were saying, Jeff, and this is in a conservative construct. He said, if you believe in eternal life, know this, that eternal life actually begins today. What you do now matters. Like, so in his theological construct, he was able to connect you don't get to separate the now from the then. Now is the then. If you do actually believe life is eternal, or there's an opportunity for eternal life, you start living that life now. And I was like, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then it causes you to do something. Going back to what you were saying, Bonnie, what is it then? It is an opiate. If we can drug everyone with hope that, that their oppression now is fine, because someday you won't have that experience. So go ahead and, let slavery happen. Let your abusive husband beat you, because someday he won't. And someday these things won't happen. It's a tool to keep people oppressed and in the dark. then you are left with this hope that maybe someday it might be better. And I think the invitation with the hope that we're talking about says you can live this now. And if the hope that you want to bring into the world does not yet exist, that is a part of your faith. And then it requires all of us to bring forth this new way of being in the world. Like, what is the point of hoping for an eternity of something you've never tasted?
Yes. I don't think you can have hope without first experiencing what you're hoping for.
Sure.
And which throws the afterlife completely out the window, even if it's just a taste, because then it can stay vague. It can stay like it's going to be good. You're just attached to like this generalized, view of something good or better. And those terms do not define anything. And how can you have hope if there's not something like defined that you're hoping for? I think hope has to have shape. It has to have legs. It has to have something that's connected to here and now.
Isn't that why they had Sabbath, right? Was to remind them that they were free people.
Yeah.
That they were wholly other. Sure, you had to live under occupation 6 days out of the week, but there is a day where you are not being treated as you are property, or that you are something else other than what you actually were meant to be, right? So, I mean, it's like we need these moments to remind us. We need Sabbath to remind us of our hope.
Yeah.
However that shape takes.
Yep.
I was just going to add to what we've already said that, in Romans, Paul talks a lot about the God of hope. And particularly, in talking about how the message, through Jesus, the message in many ways, the message of the tradition of Judaism, which has Sabbath built into it, and that God's desire for the restoration of the world, that message needs to expand beyond just the people that were holding it. It needed to go out into the whole world. And that's what the early Christians were all about, this enterprise of going out into the world with this particular message. When he speaks to that, he seems to make references to this God of hope. It's a very earthly energy, hope. And yet God, it's maybe where we actually find our partnership with God as humans in this very tangible way. Where hope is where humanity and spirit and God unite. Where fear is, it's where humanity and like evil forces perhaps unite. Like if we're going to keep it really simple and use some of this language. And that just makes sense to me. I don't know how it hits other people.
Well, I think that the when we look at the Hebrew scriptures, it's always very like earthy because there's no like sense of afterlife. And I think, later when we conflated the afterlife with the day of the Lord and the year of Jubilee and mixed all that up, we lost, I think, that one of the few times where a strict like binary definition, like in the Hebrew scriptures, like hope, it was either hope or fear. It was like hope in God and what God is going to provide and that day. And there's always concrete examples of it. The Sabbath, the year of Jubilee, like here's physically what it's going to look like instead of this vague, like streets of gold,
Right.
You're going to be in a mansion. And I remember even thinking back then, like, I don't want to sit in a worship service like 24/7 for eternity. That sounds so boring. And then getting chastised for that kind of belief. Yeah. And I was like, because there's no concrete thing. And then, that shift in early Christianity to like, no, like just this experience now, and how there's so much of it that a lot of us will never fully understand, at least experientially, because we're not living under that same kind of oppression that was pretty consistent throughout the cultures in which the scriptures were written, and how people of privilege are missing a lot of that, and how the only way you can even just kind of understand that is to hear the hope of others in circumstances that are far beyond ourselves. And I think that that's true. Like it's really based in earth, and we can develop that and learn to have gratitude and wonder by like, and as much as we can, hearing and experiencing other people's lives and experience. Just that relational aspect that we talked about when we talked about faith is also present in hope as well.
I have a small rant about this because I'm just having sort of like an epiphany around what you're saying. I mean, we've gotten to this place of talking about Year of Jubilee and Sabbath and stuff to remind us of the importance of hope. And, this idea of like hearing this message of, when we get to heaven, there's, God has a big house, many rooms and all this shit. And I'm thinking about like why this tradition was formed in the first place. And by this tradition, I mean the Jewish tradition that then seeps into Christianity and then is again used to occupy others. But prior to that, this idea of needing something now in the wake of occupation, in the wake of oppression, and what makes Christianity so difficult now is the people who are longing for an eternity and who are peddling this as the most important thing are the same people that I'm wondering if the idea of God having a house with many rooms, how satisfied they would be in that house if they've already built their own kingdom here. If God did have a house, I imagine it wouldn't look like the house that you're living in Rockland, California, or Hollywood. And certainly the people that you keep company with would not be the people in that house. And so again, I'm just reminded of like this language we use, and the people who are peddling this stuff are the very people who would be very dissatisfied with the very thing that they are talking about, because they have already established their kingdom on earth. They don't need a kingdom into the future, and yet they promise those who actually do need transformation now, who are looking for a hope, a future, and a hope, as Jeremiah would tell us, they need it now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God does have a house. It's this planet, and we all share it, and we live in it together. And yeah, those people who keep trying to sell this real estate, this in the sky or whatever, it makes absolutely no sense. It's a distractor from the oppression.
Karl Marx, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. When you were talking about the opiate, that immediately came to mind. Yeah, that's what Karl Marx was talking about. That religion, which he probably means this like hope that's for sale, is a complete distractor from the oppression that's going on right around us all the time. And I want to push back on something that you said a little bit, Jeff, because I think that those of us who identify as privileged, we don't realize that when we, there's a huge loss that comes along with privilege in a way that keeps us disconnected from understanding things that other folks understand. Like if you go to communities where they're identifying with the characters in the Bible, the stories in the Bible, like Jesus is real to them because there's an alliance between Jesus and the community in a way that Jesus gets me. Jesus understands my plight, for example. And maybe those of us who are privileged feel like, that we're outside of that somehow, that we're outside of that capacity to identify. And we lose touch with the ways within ourselves that we are suffering. Like we feel like it's not okay to acknowledge our own suffering because of these hierarchies of, I don't know. This is going to be a very stumbling way of saying something that I think is important to say, and I hope it comes out right. And if it doesn't, so be it. Let's have a conversation about it. But privilege, even the language of privilege, is not really privilege. It's a lack. It is something missing. And what's missing is an aspect, a very important, fleshy, embodied part of our humanity. And it's something to mourn.
To try to give that, I'm with you, to offer an illustration, because we've been doing a lot of that, these metaphors over the last several episodes. So there's a movie called In Time. And it's a great movie. Not a lot of people saw, but it's a fantastic movie. And essentially, what you accumulate is time. And so on your wrist, there's like a digital readout of how much time you left. Have you seen this movie? And so the wealthy people have like all this time, and you can share time with people. You know, you can put your forearms together and transfer time to other people. And the whole agenda of the privileged is to just not die, because an accident can kill you. Barring that, you've got all this, millions of minutes, billions of minutes to live. And the poor, they work just so they can run and get their time stamp so they can live for another week for the next payday. And so, again, that privilege is just a cage. It's just this fancy cage where they're just trying not to die in time.
It's really good. I forgot about that movie. Yeah.
Except it's Justin Timberlake. But other than that,
yeah, come on. He's great on screen, man. Don't knock JT.
I will. Free Britney. I think that's a valid pushback. And I will, admit that most of the time when I'm talking about that, it's coming from a place of desperately not trying to infantilize suffering. That was a real experience for me in evangelicalism, is to try to, and then seeing it play out over the last how many years, as being the victim and like we are the oppressed and adopting that. So I agree with what you're saying. I certainly feel like privilege is a loss because you're missing something. You're missing something great. Kind of to re-articulate my statement would be to like that. Well, I think what I was trying to say is basically along the lines of what you're saying, is that when we are missing out on something, there's certain things that we're not putting ourselves in a place to understand because of that privilege and how we're choosing to acknowledge it or not acknowledge it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think too that, what we're missing out on is the experience of vulnerability, and that, these so-called privileges help to protect us from certain kinds of vulnerabilities. And yet being vulnerable, at least in this faith tradition that we've inherited, it's the vulnerable that inherit the earth. So then how the whole thing is so jacked up for all of us. Like, how do we find in ourselves our own vulnerable spots and bear them to the world, rather than living in that cage? Like, I can't think of a more caged human than Donald Trump, for example, by his own privilege and the privilege of his ancestors that he is carrying forward. It makes me sad. And then on the other side, we have this rhetoric, like people who are actually not victims saying they're victims. And so we have that to contend with. And so I completely honor and respect that is a reality. And sometimes I'm just like, I don't even know what to do with that. Like, do we ignore that? Do we speak to that? In some ways, it almost feels like, a child having a temper tantrum. You just sort of look the other way until they can calm down and move on. I don't know.
Well, until they get what they want. And that's the problem.
Well, they'll continue until they get what they want.
Exactly.
Or you just like hold space and not give a lot of attention to it until it's over.
Yeah, this conversation has been rich, and we've definitely opened others. Maybe an episode on privilege, the afterlife. There's a lot of stuff, but to try to, not wrap up the conversation, but to conclude this time together. Here's my challenge. As a closing thought, what's your hope bumper sticker? You can use really small type if you need to, but what's on your hope bumper sticker?
Keep hope alive.
I think that's someone else.
I think you need to put that in quotes or something. It's a good one. Sticker. Absolutely.
Mine is just after this conversation and reflecting on that. You know how like you see the minivan that has the stick figures of all the family members and stuff like that? Mine is like on one end of the window is a little house that says hope. And then there's a car with the big bus with people in it. And then the bus on the side says gratitude and wonder. headed towards the
Yeah.
home.
Nice.
I like that.
Okay, that's
Very
better.
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Oh, we should make that and put it on the merch.
That'd be a good shirt.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a good shirt, Jeff. I would wear it. I think hope plus human equals life. Something like that.
Yeah, I think mine would just be hope is.
The equations. It gives me like flashbacks to that sticker of the he greater than I
God.
kind of thing. And I'm like,
Oh, my
yeah,
God.
no.
Yeah,
Although it'd be a good parody of that. Maybe
Yeah.
we can make a parody of that like.
Right. And on that note, let us know what you think. To add your voice to this particular conversation, comment on the show notes at irenicast.com/190. In the show notes, you'll find relevant links and a complete list of all the ways to add your voice to this conversation. And if you haven't already, please consider joining our email list. Joining our email list is the best way to keep updated on all things Irenicast, including our next intersections that will be taking place on Thursdays, February 3rd through March 10th, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 2022, in case you're listening to this episode sometime in 23 or beyond. You can find the link to subscribe in the show notes at irenicast.com/190. And on the other side of the music, brand new segment, Buddy Bingo. So Buddy Bingo is a game where each of us try to put together a word or a phrase on a bingo card for our respective buddies. We're going to take turns, go around the circle. Now, one of our challenges that I'm asking us to do is when you say the word for the buddy, say it like they would say it. So a little bit of impersonation along with the game.
Okay. This reminds me of one of the cold opens to Brooklyn Nine-Nine where they do Boyle Bingo.
Yeah.
That's what in my mind what I'm thinking
totally. That's basically what this is. All right. So we'll start with us taking turns to fill out Casey's Buddy Bingo card.
The impression thing, though, I feel that
Do it.
is problematic for me.
No mockery. No mockeries. I mean, in good fun.
Okay.
All in good fun.
All right.
All in good fun.
So we're doing.
So we're going to
Casey's
start
bingo.
with Casey. And so we're filling out Casey's bingo card, and Jeff will have you go first.
Okay. My first one is Casey says honey.
Yes, honey.
So honey's on the bingo card.
Honey's on the
Honey's
bingo
on the bingo
card.
card.
Okay. All right. This is a direct quote of Casey's, I think. You are called beloved. And I love hearing him say that. It always makes me feel so warm and just, yeah. And I see you say it to so many people and you mean it every single time.
Mm-hmm. So mine actually includes the word honey in one version, but there's multiple iterations of this. Clergy drag, honey.
Yes, honey. Yes. Clergy drag.
And for those of you listening, there was a little shake when Rajeev said that.
That's right. I saw it.
Everyone needs the
Get
visual
the
of
whole
that.
impersonation, yeah. Because Casey embodies that.
Yeah. That was really sweet.
All right, so now it's Jeff's turn. Jeff's bingo card turn. Bonnie, Casey, you start, and we'll go this order.
So mine is, and we are Irenicast. Because Jeff, I mean, you are the one who,
For sure.
yeah, you embody all of this, and we are grateful for you.
It's a very generous we.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Because, yeah.
that's right.
Mm-hmm. So mine is one of those, like, those things where you see like a hidden graphic inside a logo for the first time. You can never unsee it.
Like the arrow and the
Like
FedEx
the arrow
logo.
and the FedEx thing. Yeah. So I have a feeling this is going to be that for Jeff.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to say it the way he says it. 100%.
100%. Yeah.
It's true.
100%.
It's very true.
That is such a
100%,
Jeff quote.
Rajeev,
Yeah.
100%.
That's really good. I don't know if I could do an impersonation, but I've heard Jeff say this so many times. Sure, we can make that work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
see
totally.
Jeff as like
Yeah.
the possibility like guru.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful to be in relationship with you because of that.
I mean, the fact we're all here doing this.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
is,
what could you propose to Jeff and he would say, I don't know. That's he would be like, let me check into that. Like always.
posting the 10 Commandments in the lobby might be where he.
Well, I
draws
know,
the
but I
line.
mean something interesting and
We
good.
can do a parody of that, though.
Yeah. I'm talking about interesting, good
Yeah,
things.
Right. And
not-
the sentence
one.
would be, we can make that
That's a good
work 100%.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Nice.
This is bordering on a drinking game for our listeners.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, so now it's Bonnie's turn. I'll go first. Seriously?
You just hear that a lot.
Yeah, that would be
enough.
more of a personal.
Yeah.
I think that's insight into the.
Specifically directed. At.
Yeah. I think I can close my eyes and even see the look that she gives you when she says that.
What's your bingo? for Bonnie?
Mine is, we are all in process.
True.
I came up with two because I knew someone was going to say that one. In fact, when we had our conversation just now, I almost said bingo because I knew process theology was going to be in there. But my other one is Bonnie talks about wine.
Yeah, I do. I do talk about wine.
See, and this is why we're best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my backup for Casey, actually.
What's
Wine.
wine?
Just wine. The word
Yeah.
wine. Yeah.
Maybe Casey, my bingo card could be like
That's right. While
could
we
be
drink
one
wine.
bingo card.
That's right.
Another one was Palm Springs. I have a whole list.
I had Palm Springs just in
Did you?
case too.
In case you're building your own bingo cards at home. So I guess it's my turn now.
It is.
Oh yeah.
And
Who do you want to
Casey, why don't you go first?
That's not pizza. That's an open sandwich.
Yes. An open face sandwich.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love it.
At a protest, I didn't put anything like that on here. I have down Rajeev wears a provocative t-shirt. It's like your brand. Like it's
Yeah, it's
True.
true.
Yeah.
True.
I know it's more visual and doesn't
Yeah.
work in this, but for everyone listening, Rajeev, I mean, right now, he's
True.
wearing a t-shirt
Wearing
that says,
Descent.
Got the
Descent.
RBG necklace
Yeah.
thing on the t-shirt with Descent. Yep.
Okay, mine. I'm going to try to do an impression. Not impressed.
What?
You do.
I say that all the time?
Well, I like. Yeah. Did you know that?
Those words?
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna. It's like it's my own little FedEx arrow. Like, huh.
I mean, more an attitude of that. You know,
Yes,
like
that-
you're very.
yes.
You're very.
Yeah.
I've seen that face.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's more like a.
It's like a sound.
But I've heard you say it. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed,
Okay.
and it's
Gosh.
okay.
What a jerk.
No, it doesn't. I wouldn't say it's. I would just say you're very discerning.
Yeah,
It's
that's
true.
right.
It's,
All right.
I've heard
It's
the words
not-
too. Now that it is
Yeah.
a FedEx thing, because now I'm thinking about it. Just before we started recording,
Yeah.
we talked about the midnight whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
And you're like,
No.
Yeah.
not impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, you sure did.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, totally. Okay. I'm going to pay attention to that now.
Yeah. I mean, it's so the fact that we're all here, we must be very impressive. So
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
All of you. And any other bonus bingos that people had on their list?
Jeff talking about technology and movies are the two that I
Oh,
could
yeah.
think of,
That's true.
especially
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's there.
yeah.
Left
Listen,
Behind.
Left
That's
behind.
for Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That finds its way in every so often.
Yeah.
I
Kirk
guess it
Cameron and
does,
Left
right? Yeah.
Behind.
Yeah.
And your buddy Kirk Cameron.
Oh my gosh.
and Rajeev's comedian references.
Yep. Yeah.
Lots of those.
Yeah, for real.
Well,
Yeah.
and your
That's
laugh is something, I mean, it just brings so
Yeah.
much
I had
warmth.
hearty gut laugh
Yeah.
on my list for
Yeah.
Rajeev.
Yep.
I'm fighting it right now.
Don't fight it. It's a safe space.
Okay. Well, that will do it for us this week. A reminder, Intersections, Thursdays, February 3, to March 10, 2022. You can sign up on the website, Irenicast.com. Also, the book that Bonnie co-edited, Partnering with God, is out. It's on Amazon and other venues as well. If you enjoy Irenicast and would like to join the work we're doing, please consider donating to our PayPal link at Irenicast.com/PayPal. We're committed to keeping the show free for listeners, but there are costs involved and your financial support is necessary. That's Irenicast.com/PayPal. Irenicast is a nonprofit organization, so your donations are tax deductible. You can also support the show by just making sure you follow wherever you listen to podcasts. And if your platform allows it, leave a rating and or review. So for this week, this is Rajeev.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Bonnie.
And this is Casey.
Thanks for joining the conversation.